Now, this is a fairy tale, and as in so many fairy tales, there is a king and a queen who are longing for a child. Oh, they were longing for a child, and the years were going past, and they did not have a baby in their castle, and the king in particular, he got very, very worried, and he started consulting first just advisors, if only he had found that old advisor, but not available at that time, and so he went to sorcerers and sorceresses, and he went to hedge witches, and he went to, just anyone he could possibly think of, and they all said, well, we don't know. So he remembered that in his own hometown, there had been a kitchen witch, really. She was the old wise woman of the village, and she lived in it all by herself off in a hut, and he went to her, he said, we are longing for a child, please just tell me, will we have a baby? And the old woman said, yes, you will have a baby. Oh, and in fact, that baby will be healthy and grow up. Oh, well, the king stopped listening at that point. He was just beside himself with joy, started dancing around, and so he didn't hear her say, as he walked out the door, but you will not have him long. Even if he'd heard, the king probably wouldn't have believed it. And when he got home, he told his wife, and she rejoiced, and within the year, they had a baby. And that baby was loud. That baby was one of those babies that cried and cried and cried, mostly at night, all night long. They went through nanny after nanny after nanny. All the servants refused to sleep in the castle. Mama and Papa were really the only ones who walked all night long with this baby. And one night when the king was walking this baby, he was saying, please, please, please stop crying. I'll give you anything you want. Ice cream all day, every day. I tell you what, when you grow up, I'll find the most beautiful princess with the most money in the world. Maybe you can play for the Lakers. I don't know, but I promise I will give you anything you want. Why, I would give you youth without age and life without death. And the baby stopped crying. Huh. Perhaps the king didn't realize he was living in a fairy tale, because he forgot. Almost immediately, he just was swept away with the joy of this child. Because after that night, the child slept through the night and played and learned through the days and was really remarkable, even for a prince. He was growing up, and everywhere he went, everyone loved this boy. And when he turned 18, he went to his father and he said, it's time. Give me what you promised. And the king said, what are you talking about? I've given you everything. And the boy said, no, you promised youth without age and life without death, and now's the time. The king said, that's impossible. You might as well ask for the sky or the moon. I can't give you what's impossible. And the boy said, well, then I'll have to go and look for life without death and youth without age. And his father and his mother both tried to talk him out of it, but when the king saw that the boy was really serious, he said, okay, I'll send you out well-provisioned with 20 men and the best horses, and go and explore and look, but please be back in a year and a day. And the boy said, I am sure I will be able to find what I need in that amount of time. Because he was 18. And so he was getting ready. And his father said, 6 weeks, you will have everything you need, you can start out. And that night, the prince's sleep was disturbed in a way that it hadn't been since he was a baby. And he couldn't sleep at all, and he wanted to cry, but he didn't, because he was 18, but he kept hearing a voice that said, "Come and find me, and I will help you get what you want." And so he just started looking. In the middle of the night, he started looking up and down in the castle, couldn't find who this voice could belong to. He went out into the royal mews where all the horses were, and he saw perfection, perfect horse after perfect horse after perfect horse, until he reached the very last stall. And there was an old nag. Her skin was full of sores, her mouth was full of barely stubs of teeth, her eyes were roomy, her back was swayed, and he looked at her and he said, "Are you the one?" And he reached out and grabbed her tail. And the horse turned around and said, "Yes, I am." Because this is a fairy tale. Of course she was. And she said, "In order for me to help you get what you want, you will have to take care of me for the 6 weeks with your own hand. And you must look in your family's treasury and find the oldest set of armor that you can, and you must restore it with your own hands." And so the boy did. For the next 6 weeks, well, first he went into the treasury and he looked through chest after chest after chest, and he found one that had some really old, rusty armor in it. And he brought it up to his bedroom, and he got all of the pieces out, and he sanded them down, and he put them together, and pretty soon he had a beautiful, shiny set of armor. And when he got the last piece into place, he went down to clean the horse as he had done every day and give her oats that she could chew with those teeth. And the last of the sores fell off that horse, and 4 wings sprouted out. And there she was, beautiful and in perfect health. And she said, "Now listen, we have to keep these wings a secret. We will go to the edge of your father's kingdom, and then you must turn back all of his men, and then our adventure will begin." And so the boy set out with all 20 men and all those horses, and he was riding what appeared to be just a beautiful steed, and they got to the edge of his father's land, and he said, "Okay, the rest of you go home." Well, they didn't want to, but he was the prince, and so they did. And as soon as they were out of sight, the horse unfurled her beautiful wings, and she took off with the prince on her back. And they had adventure after adventure. I won't tell you all of them, but the first one was with the Scorpion King in the neighboring kingdom. He was a terrible, terrible, evil wizard and very powerful. And the horse gave the prince advice, and they defeated that wizard, and so he shoved them along to his sister's kingdom, because she was the woodpecker sorceress. And when I say woodpecker sorceress, that's not just a metaphor. She would turn into a huge woodpecker, and she would come down on any men who dared to cross into her kingdom. And well, there were just piles and piles of bones. No one had ever returned. And when the horse brought this prince into the woodpecker sorceress's kingdom, the woodpecker sorceress did not attack. In fact, she turned herself into a middle-aged redhead woman about the age of his own mother. And she said, "Hey, this horse is too magical for me to attack you. Tell me, what's your story?" And so he told her the whole story, and she said, "Oh, I have 3 daughters. I think they might be able to help you. Now, they think that I am hard to get along with, and so they moved into their own kingdom across the mountains. But if you can get over the mountains without spilling your glass." No, she said, "If you can get over the mountains and find my daughters, they will be able to give you what you want." So the prince said to the horse, "What do you think?" And the horse spread her wings and flew over the mountains. And as they came down over the mountains, the whole of the mountainside was filled with singing. In the land of milk and honey, eat your fill and raise a glass. If you stay, you'll find it's funny, because time simply will not pass. And it was beautiful. And it filled the mountainside, and they landed. And the prince looked up, and there were the 3 most beautiful women he had ever seen, each more lovely than the next as he looked at them, one with long gold hair to her knees, one with short black curls, one with red hair and braids on a crown on her head. And they said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am here because your mother sent me." And they laughed with joy. They said, "We can give you what you want. There's just one condition. See over there where the mountain covers the valley in shadow? It is always in shadow. That is the valley of lamentation. You must never go into that valley, or you will be stricken with unhappiness. But if you stay with us, you will have happiness beyond your wildest dreams." And so he did. And he had mead, and he had cider, and he had milk and honey, and 3 of the most beautiful women in the world who just loved him, and they were kind, and they were smart, and they were funny. And he enjoyed himself thoroughly. And he felt as though time had barely passed when his horse came to him and said, "We must go." And he said, "I'm not leaving. This is wonderful. Why don't you stay with us?" And the horse said, "I must go now, or it will be the end for me. If you ever want me, whistle, and if I can, I will come and get you." And the prince, well, he was sad to say goodbye to his beautiful winged companion, but, well, the 3 women, they said, "You know, we've been getting along so well. Why don't you join us, and we will, the 4 of us, rule this kingdom." And he thought, "Oh, this is great. I've only been here a few days, and already I'm in charge." And he had a wonderful time, and he, again, enjoyed himself thoroughly. And then one day, while he was out hunting, as those princes are wont to do, aren't they, James? Yeah, he was out hunting, and he was chasing a rabbit. And he did not notice that the rabbit ran into the shadow, into the valley of lamentation, and he just chased that rabbit with his bow and his arrow, and as soon as the shadow hit him, he was stricken with unhappiness. He thought, "I want to see my mother and my father. Oh, I long to see them." And so he went back and he said, I'm sorry. I will be back as soon as I can, but I really must go home." And the 3 women said, no, please do not leave us." But he whistled for his horse, and she came. And she flew him up and over the mountain. And as they were flying, he could feel his body growing tired. And he thought that was odd. But, well, being away from his beautiful home, and that lovely mead, and that wonderful milk and honey, that must be why I feel so tired. And the horse landed in the middle of the kingdom of the woodpecker sorceress. But things had really changed. There were farms and people everywhere that field of bones had been. And the prince said, "Is the woodpecker sorceress allowing you to live here in her land?" And everybody laughed. Oh my gosh, said one of the men, you sound like my old grandfather, woodpecker, sorceress. What a ridiculous tale. And so the prince said to his horse, let's go further. Let's go home. And the horse walked from the woodpecker's, sorceress's kingdom into the scorpion king's kingdom. And there, things were even more different. There were factories. There were people everywhere in machines. And the prince said, is the scorpion king making you live like this? And they said, Scorpion king, get out of our way. We don't have time for such old wives' tales. And so he got back on his horse, and now it was even harder. And he looked down and noticed that his hair had grown very long and white past his knees. And he rode the horse as carefully as he could back into his father and mother's kingdom. And it was the same story there. Everything had changed. But he found some people who had names that sounded familiar. And he said, the castle with my mother and father, do you know where that is? He said, well, there is still a castle here, barely. And they pointed him down the road. And he walked into the castle and climbed to the top of the tower where his bedroom had been. And the white hair fell in clumps at his feet, and his body barely took him to the top. But once he was there, he looked and saw the chest where he had taken the old rusty armor. And he opened it up, and a dry voice talked to him from within the chest. Oh, if you had been gone for just a few weeks more, I would never have been able to take you. And with that, his own death reached out and grabbed him and pulled him into the chest, and they both disappeared. I hear that some of you are sad, but when I was drawn to this story, I thought, nothing lasts forever. And how wonderful to have found, even for a little while, your heart's desire.